Hey guys, today I wanted to make a quick video just sharing some thoughts I've been mulling over in my head recently about the evolution of learning in poker and kind of how, both an individual but also the community as a whole gets progressively better, how the level of play goes up, and how we might think about, a player starting today versus a player who's been playing for 10 years and what their trajectory of level of play might look like a year from now and how the game state today compares to 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and even further back. So one of the things that is interesting and encouraging for people who are playing today or getting started today or have been playing for a few years but are getting more serious about their game now is that getting good at poker has never been easier, and a lot of that is just because of the tools that are available. And a common question I, get asked is it too late to get into poker? Or is it too late to really get serious about NLHE? Maybe I should just move on to Omaha. Questions like that. And, I think there's two directions to look at that from. One is going to be from the idea of the ecosystem itself. There's clearly less money in poker than there was pre-Black Friday. There's less, recreational players. The U.S. being out just limits things quite a bit. But on the other hand, in terms of your ability as a player to get good, the widespread availability of the tools we have today between solvers and training programs, like Simple GTO Trainer or the new PLO one that Random Lunch introduced, greatly accelerate the rate at which a player could get good. And so this has a few interesting implications. One is that I think it means hard work and discipline is more important than kind of intuition and raw talent was in the past. And so one thing I think is interesting is that today, in today's games with today's tools, if you are someone who's willing to work hard and study hard, even if you aren't, naturally kind of an intuitive, wizard like some of the poker greats of the past were viewed to be, like your Phil Ivey or something, just through hard work alone, you'll be very likely to reach an extremely high level of play, which wasn't really, clearly possible 10 years ago. And furthermore, the people who were these kind of intuitive geniuses of the past who haven't put in the work in the last few years are losing ground against the field quite quickly. And I think, an interesting data point that we've been able to observe this month and starting again next week has been the Galfond Challenge. So this is, in PLO, not in NLHE, and PLO's tools and, just the level of understanding of GTO theory and GTO application and proper ranges and such among the population is a few years behind what is available for NLHE. But we're seeing that Phil Galfond is, playing a reasonably unknown high-stakes regular and getting beaten at a rate where, given our small sample, it's already extremely likely from a statistical perspective that he is a heavy underdog, although we can't rule out variance. And, the two windows we might look at is what is the probability he'd be this far behind at this point in the challenge. And then we also might judge just on community opinion or opinion from experts, which you could use the betting lines as a proxy for. And by both of those measures, it seems that someone who was this kind of intuitive, once in a era talent is looking to be significantly behind the kind of high stakes regular level of play of today's games. And so I think that's a fairly interesting thing to observe. And a way I might think about it is if you imagine a player who's been playing for 10 years, they have a lot of experience, a lot of practice, a lot of intuition built up. And if you had a player start playing today who lacked all of that, but had all the tools that are available now to practice with, assuming that the new player was willing to work harder than the older player was, how long would it take the new player to surpass the old player in terms of, win rate or just raw ability. And you can imagine it as in a heads-up matchup, or you can imagine it as just kind of win rate at 6 max, either of those things. And I think if you asked that question in 2010 or 2012, the answer would have been quite a long time. There are cases of players who, kind of grounded out, shooting up the ranks quickly. But it's difficult to assess what those players' talent was to start with. I would say that today I would be reasonably confident that someone who is willing to work hard for 1 to 2 years, studying GTO solutions, studying theory, drilling like crazy against, GTO trainers, that they would catch up within, like I said, 1 to 2 years to someone who'd been kind of a mid-stakes regular and wasn't working all that hard on their game for a decade. And I don't think that it would have been possible to say that until quite recently. And I think it's interesting the impact that tools and widely available, pre-flop ranges, c-betting strategy, the ability to actually train against a, GTO solution, all play into this accelerated rate of learning. And what's emerging out of this is that we're starting to have kind of a stable metagame in poker due to GTO. And some people view that as the end state of theory, where the game stops being interesting because everyone's just blindly playing GTO. And I actually think that's just the beginning and when things kind of start to get interesting. So first I want to unpack that statement a little bit and talk about what the meta is for poker and how it's evolved over time. And I'd say the meta is the prevailing thinking of regulars of how the game should be played. And there's probably a different meta for, different stakes. There's a different meta for live versus online. And even as an experienced player, it can be somewhat confusing when you go hop in a game with a different meta than what you're used to. So if you are an online player and you go sit down at a live table of similar stakes, people will be using different sizings. Their actions will kind of be corresponding to different standard ranges. And what GTO should do in theory is kind of drive those metas closer and closer together, as the kind of quote unquote correct strategy is just going to be a little stronger, and players from a meta who have experience playing in a meta that is closer to GTO, as they kind of go out into other games and play at different stakes or play live or what have you, they'll start to win more and people will copy them and so on. And so as an example of a very different meta today versus, 5 to 10 years ago, there was a time, maybe 2012 or so, where the meta for c-betting and single raise pots was a super high frequency, like 80% or something. And counter strategy to that started to be to float a lot of c-bets and call them light with a range that also was non-GTO by quite a bit. Whereas nowadays, more of the 45 to 50% c-betting range is kind of standard for online, not for live. The sizings are different. And we're seeing the meta kind of start to consolidate. And in some ways, it might feel like a game gets boring when the meta is known and consistent and like the game is solved and, no money in poker, everyone's solid kind of thinking. I actually think that that's in a lot of ways where the game starts to get interesting, and where these kind of higher level thought processes start to come in, and where good players can extract a surprising edge from bad ones. And I think we're certainly seeing that, in that some of the best players in the world have shot up with surprising win rates over the last few years in this era where it seems like the game is more solved than ever. We still have players coming in and just crushing the games in at rates that surprise people. And the analogy I draw would be to chess. If you imagine playing chess with people who just don't know what the standard openings are, as someone who casually plays chess and was better than all of my friends, and then played chess against some people who were ranked and actually had studied all the openings, their early game play was so solid that I would just get crushed from not understanding why move X is a bad move. But when two people who have that understanding play each other, there's lots of subtle variations they can use to manipulate the state of the game to head down certain paths that they understand better, or to head down paths where they think their opponent's play is weak. And I think there's a similar kind of thing in poker where, there's a lot of areas in poker where GTO play has what I'd call range flexibility, which means that you can use slightly different sizes or slightly different ranges or slightly different strategies with little to no EV loss in a game theory sense. So limping in heads up, you can limp a lot or none, and depending on the stack depth, end up with this very similar EV. C-bet sizing, on a lot of boards, you could C-bet a variety of sizes or multiple sizes and have little to no difference in EV. And so as the meta gets defined and what GTO strategies across those things get more well understood, it opens up the ability for players with a deep understanding of correct play to kind of direct the game via their choice in sizing or their choice in ranges in directions that their opponents don't understand, and start to engage in some of this higher level thinking where you end up in very tricky turn and river situations, and you're just playing a deeper, more thoughtful and interesting game. So while from an ecosystem perspective, I think poker is certainly not as attractive to get into as it was in 2007 or something. I think bots are a fear. I think just the amount of money coming in is a fear. From the perspective of a new player who wants to get good, I think the game is more attractive to start playing than it's ever been. The tools are there. The information is there to get a very solid fundamental understanding of the game very quickly. And then exceptional players can take that solid understanding and run with it and do amazing things. So I will wrap that up here. Just some kind of food for thought. Definitely let me know in the comments what you think. And thanks for watching.